Okay.
Hi, I'm Sarah Barrett Neal, Gallery Manager with the Glen Arbor Arts Center. Today, I'm in conversation with Leelanau County artist Mary Beth Acosta as part of the Arts Center's exhibition Paperwork. Mary Beth works in Collage under the creative nom de guerre, the Feral Housewife. That's one clue to put her delightful work into context. Her tools and materials are straightforward: glue stick, manicure scissors, a spoon, wax paper, and images of housewives, big fin cars, and appliances she calls from publications from the 1940s to the 1960s. Welcome, Mary Beth.
Thank you, Sarah.
Collage started for you as, and I'm quoting, part fun, part journal, and all self-expression. Talk about this.
Well, I got my original inspiration from a fellow collage artist, Rita McNamara. She invited me over to make paper, and we made handmade paper and made it into a passport. That was just kind of the goal. Mm-hmm. And I guess I just took that literally. I took the passport and ran.
So that was your permission, your starting point?
Yes, and then I was able to use it as journaling is how I originally did it, just for myself. And I like journaling with collage because some pictures meant something and others didn't mean anything. So it was like a code. I could say whatever I wanted and it was virtually unreadable unless you know me, I guess. But I made probably 5 books of 200 small collages, 5 by 6, you know, in a little spiral bound books. And that's how I got started with it. And then I entered a show in Traverse City when I first moved there, and at the Inside Out Gallery, Michael Kurth invited me. And when it was there, Jean from the Denos saw my work and then had me be part of an automobile show there at the Denos. And I guess that was where I took off to.
How did you learn collage?
Mainly through Rita, just a couple days of working with her. But it's, you know, really I look at it as composition. I mean, that is really the core of what I'm trying to do. And it's funny, some of them I work on for hours and hours and hours, and others they like make themselves. You know, you just know when you get the composition that feels right.
It is a visceral thing.
It is.
People, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, and I've got a lot of limitations that I put on myself for size, and I want to be able to reproduce them easily. So the proportions, but also the images I use, you know, I can't just go get some yellow paint. If I need that yellow, I have to find that yellow or deal with the writings that are across people's clothes, you know. So I take stuff from the hem and I rebuild so they're the ones that look like there's like 4 or 5 pieces, they can have 70 pieces in them.
I'm going to pull up an image here of your work. I want to use this one as a point of discussion for us. Who's the Feral Housewife?
Well, I get most of my collages speak something about me, I guess left over from the journaling. But the Feral Housewife is, I lived for a long time on a farm, Mike and I, for like 25 years in the middle of the National Forest. And I was a stay-at-home mom, but I had a feminist trapped in me. And that was expressed through very gender fluid situations there where Mike went to work, but I built the house, and, you know, we had to kill chickens and raise things. So I was able to express myself and be powerful in myself, but from outside, I just looked incredibly traditional and like I just stayed at home and did nothing. So this was kind of my way of realizing that you could express power no matter what your situation was. And in this one, I try to make fun of the promises they give you. It's like you don't have to kneel anymore. You can actually stand up, but you still have to wash the floor. So they give you all these promises and they only go so far. So, and I try to use a lot of humor just because that gets you through a lot.
Well, these images, and I'm going to put this gal somewhere in the 1940s and 50s, are so iconic, and they're such strong images containing such strong messages about what women are supposed to be like.
Right. I mean, can you imagine that they give you permission to stand up? Just like, oh my gosh. Yeah, this was part of a show about the promises of appliances, a one-woman show that I've done in the past. These were collages projected behind me as I told the stories.
I'm going to put up another image, Mary Beth, and you can talk a little bit more about the stories that your work intend to tell. Who is this? Who are these gals?
Well, these are from the 40s, so these are earlier ones. This was one of the 25 images I had at the car show at the Denos. Mm-hmm. And this one is speaking to that we were always given permission to do stuff by men, only so much at that time. And when we could get driver's licenses, it's, my first question was, why can't we just drive away? We have a car and a driver's license. So these are just women sort of expressing themselves about that they're powerful because they have transportation and ways to get around.
What's so powerful about your work is there's a couple of different layers to it. When you first look at it, it's just charming and funny and ho, 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 that's another era. But the longer you look at it, you start to feel the images and the ideas behind them sink in.
Okay.
So it's very disarming. And you are able to make a statement without clobbering somebody over the head, which is a real art form in itself.
Right. I've had people come up and say, well, you're trying to say something, like I wasn't trying to say something. But I think, yeah, you can just look at them real casually because, there's a lot of retro images out, but there's very few that I don't have kind of I'm trying to make a point about something.
Mm-hmm. Your work, as we're talking here, are built on vintage images from the 40s to the 60s. Talk about this particular time period in the context of stories you tell, and you also have some, let's say, legalistic restrictions that causes you to choose images from this period.
Right. Well, I grew up in the 50s and 60s in Detroit, and I think I was heavily influenced by the automotive industry. I mean, everybody could tell what year the cars were as they drove down the road. I mean, people were really tied into the design. And I've just always been fascinated by the way those design things made their way into the house. Like my original stove here at our cottage looked like you drove a car into the into the kitchen and put burners on it. I just really enjoyed that that transfer of the design from the automotive into the house. And the clothes, I've just always been fascinated by the clothes. My mother taught me to sew when I was really young, and we sewed all our clothes for a long time. And I don't know, I was kind of taken in too by the promises that all these magazines were making for women. I mean, they were just full of promises that that's what they were promises. And a lot of things fell flat. That's why I'm trying to take them out of those magazines and actually let them drive away out of there and stand up or whatever it is. But it's true, the copyright laws were changed by Sonny Bono. And basically you cannot use anything before 1964 images without permission. So I'm pretty stuck, which is fine with me because those are the images I want anyway. But you have to be careful. You have to change things enough that you don't have copyright issues. But the only person I've heard from were models that were actually in my images. So that was kind of fun. They were from the sorority of supermodels from the 50s and 60s. And I've become friends with quite a few of them. So that's worked in my favor so far.
So what you're saying is the images that you're using from the 40s to the 60s are royalty free. You're free to
Yeah, I'm still careful because if they ever had a copyright on them, they're still considered copyrighted. Things don't go into the public domain the same way they used to. So I'm still careful that I change an image enough to make it a piece of art, not just stealing it.
Right. It's got some of your creative handprints all over it.
Right. And when I first started making these and journaling, I used a lot of images that were later, like from National Geographic or whatever. And I always thought, well, I wasn't selling them, so it didn't really matter. But I actually ended up one time in New York at a gallery with the women photographers from the Leakey family that had the same images up there. And I thought, well, I guess you can't be assured you would never run into something like that. So that was kind of fun.
Another chapter from the Small World book.
Right.
So let's talk about how you source images.
Well, I had collected quite a few anyway, and I guess I used them just for like making birthday cards or something, just for fun. But I would buy them at garage sales or on eBay. I would bid $1 a magazine delivered. But a big source was people that collect magazines. I mean, they would have 200 pounds of magazines in their basement since 1940. They saved like everyone. And they were just so precious. But it turns out they're not that precious after 50 years sitting in the basement, and they would give them to me. And I would say, I'm just going to destroy these. But they wanted something made out of them. So that's how I get a lot of magazines. I'll just get a big batch of something like that.
Do you make any work using images that are from contemporary time? And by that, I'm wondering about the differences in the paper, the quality of the paper from the 40s to the 60s and today.
Oh, I've used stuff back from the 1800s, and that is a big issue for me for the construction because, it's kind of funny too, because it's ephemera. That paper is ephemera and it's not meant to last. And so and they last until I take them out, till I free them from the magazines. And then they're like vampires. They could just disappear if you don't treat them right. So I've tried so many different ways to keep the stuff from fading, but there's been a lot of collages where I'll make the collage and I always photograph it at that point because the next thing, you never know what's going to happen. But I've used different kinds of UV protection, and sometimes the different papers, one will just bleed right through and it's basically destroyed. So it's how I I put an acrylic that is UV, that helps with the UV. And I always say, you know, keep this out of the light, put it in, don't stick it in the sun. You know, I mean, they are ephemeral. So I'm trying to create something forever out of something that just, you know, is difficult once you take it out of the magazine.
That's a heroic task.
It really is. And as far as using stuff current, only on like if it's a commission, someone will have something about it, or I'll intersperse, like I did on those collages for that show, people's faces in different places, you know, to bring it together, or put family pictures together or something.
Mary Beth, I'm going to bring up another image here of, oops, goodbye. And let's have you talk a little bit about your tools. The beauty of collage is that you don't need any special anything to do it. You can just do it. So talk about your tools a little bit. And I'm really interested in the use of wax paper in your process.
Okay. The one thing that's missing from this picture is a magnifying light. I have like a medical magnifying light, because I cut out hairs. That's my best skill, is I'm really good with scissors. I can really cut. But basically it's just kindergarten art. It's glue sticks and wooden spoons and, you know, newspaper or magazine paper. The wax paper does two things. One, when you use the glue stick and you put piece of wax paper over the image and you use a spoon to push it, it will push the glue absolutely to the edge of the piece I've glued on, and it just disappears. The edge disappears. And I couldn't do that if I couldn't push down on the image like that in a steady way, or a way that wouldn't hurt the rest of the image. I've had gallery owners, I'll bring them my stuff and they'll just say, I don't know what it is. And I try to explain what it is. And I have to take it out of the frame and let them touch it with their fingers to feel it. So it's kind of magic, the wax paper. It seems so mundane, but it really works. And the other thing that it does is it doesn't stick to the paper and the glue. So I always press them between wax paper and heavy books.
That seems to also suggest that it takes care of the problem of bubbles and ripples that sometimes plague glued paper being pushed down.
Right, because the glue stick is pretty dry, but you know, then you also only have like one chance. I mean, some of these things are pretty unmanageable that I've cut out, you know, and you get the glue on and it's just like, you got to get it exactly right. So.
Why not a brayer as opposed to a spoon?
I never thought of that. I have a spoon.
Well, the spoons are lovely. What do I want to say? I don't want to use the word vintage. It's just more of a celebration of the handwork end of it and the simple tools end of it.
I guess so. And it's like, if you're looking at this image, the petals from the orchid. I mean, with a brayer, I guess I would just roll over the whole thing. But with the spoon, I start in the middle of that and work. I'm actually pushing glue out. So it's a construction thing.
Mary Beth, what's the best way for people to see your artwork? And talk a little bit about the impediments that COVID and the pandemic have brought to your work. Well,
it's a lot. The galleries have really struggled, and the galleries that I was in, 3 of them shut right before COVID or during COVID. They just can't make it if they can't be open. So probably the best place to see my work now is on my website, the feralhousewife.com. or you can contact me through that, and I have an awful lot of stuff at my condo in Traverse City that I can show people stuff if they wanted to see.
I want to thank you so much. I love what you do. It's just a delight you have such a wonderful sense of humor that comes through in everything you do. I want to tell everyone that the paperwork exhibition continues through March 24 in the Art Center Gallery, and it's also online. So go to glenarborart.org and click on the exhibits tab. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more, and see you next time.